Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar about Pickmere to Agdon and Hulls Heath. My name is Jonathan, and I'm an engagement executive for HS2. We'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us today. As you will understand, we are unable to hold large information events at the moment due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and we hope this webinar will help keep you informed about the design refinement consultation and updates for your area, and give you an opportunity to ask general questions which you may have. During the webinar, you will hear from our engagement manager for your area before we move into a question and answer session, where we will be joined by a team of specialists who will be able to answer as many questions as time permits. Please note that we will only be able to answer general questions. Any questions relating to your individual circumstances should be raised via our help desk, who will be able to provide you with the specific advice for your needs. If we get a lot of questions come in around the same topic, we may group these together and answer as one to avoid repeating answers. And if we do run out of time to answer general questions and you feel you have not had your question answered, again, we would ask that you'd contact the help desk. Before I hand over to my colleague John, I want to share some technical information with you. We don't anticipate any technical issues during our event today. However, we wanted to provide you with some advice should you experience any connection issues. If your feed freezes, wait for about 10 seconds as it will most likely correct itself. If this doesn't happen, use the leave button to exit the call and rejoin using the event link. You will be able to use the toggle at the bottom of your screen to rewind back to where you left the event. You can also use this functionality at any point during the call, should you need to pause for any reason. If there is a freeze or you disconnect and you are unable to rejoin due to a wider Microsoft incident, we will email you with further information. There is a Q&A and comment function which you should be able to find at the top right of your screen. My colleague Helen will be keeping an eye out on the questions that come through as we go, and then at the end of the session today, she will ask the team here to answer as many of them as we have time to get through. Please note we will only answer general questions. Any questions relating to your individual circumstances should be raised via our help desk. If we get a lot of questions come in around the same topic, we may group these together and answer as one to avoid repeating answers. If you have previously attended one of our local information events or drop-ins, you may be familiar with our next speaker, who will talk you through the purpose of today's session. John, over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan, and hi to all on the webinar today. So this presentation covers the community area MA03, which is from Pickmere to Agdon and Hulls Heath, and that's approximately 10 kilometres in length, and it extends northwards from Lostock Graelum to north of the M56. It will cover proposed refinements to the design that we're currently consulting on, a number of smaller changes in your area that we've made to our proposals, and what to expect from us in the future. All of the information can be found on the HS2 website, or you can contact our 24-hour help desk, and details for both will be provided at the end of this presentation. First, I will summarise the design refinement that's now been confirmed for inclusion by the Minister of State following a consultation in 2019. A summary of the feedback received in response to the consultation and the reasons for the decisions taken have been published and can also be found by visiting our website. So the refinement in this area was the proposed inclusion of passive provision for 2 future grade separated junctions in the HS2 design. One to allow the future use of the HS2 line into Manchester as part of Northern Powerhouse Rail for services between Manchester, Warrington and Liverpool, and the second to allow HS2 services between London and Liverpool to use future MPR infrastructure. So the Minister of State has confirmed that these junction provisions will be included in the design of Phase 2B. So on this slide, where we're looking from north to south, left to right, you can see the passive provision for a future Liverpool to London junction. The other junction and more detail is available as part of the published update. So as well as that consultation, we're currently consulting on some further changes along the route from Crewe to Manchester and beyond as part of our Western Leg design refinement consultation. So this consultation runs from the 7th of October to the 11th of December 2020. None of the changes are actually in this area, but we do encourage everyone living along the route to let us know what you think about the proposals. And if you'd like to find out more about these proposals and the consultation, including how to respond, please visit www.hs2.org.uk/phase 2B. All the feedback from the current consultation will be considered as part of the Minister of State's decision whether to include these changes in the design of the route for phase 2B before we deposit the hybrid bill. Next, I'd like to tell you about some of the other changes that we've made to the design in your area. And listening to local community feedback is central to our commitment to be a good neighbour, and it provides an invaluable source of local knowledge as part of the process to refine our design to construct, maintain and operate the railway. And we do try to incorporate this feedback wherever reasonably possible. And here are some examples of changes we have made in response to issues and concerns that you have raised with us. Firstly, the Royal Cheshire Showground. You told us you were concerned about the impact of the railway crossing the Royal Cheshire Showground and said that this will cause disruption to the Royal Cheshire Show and potentially threaten the future of this important event. So you can see the plans we published in 2018 on the left and the updated designs on the right for the same section of the railway. So what we've done to minimise disruption to the show, we've now included crossing points under the railway to allow access through the showground site. We've also made changes to the Flittergate Lane, Pickmere Lane junction, which means that we now require less land from the showground. In response to your concerns about the size of the compounds proposed at the A50 Hoo Green Lane junction and the proximity of the proposed transfer node to people's homes, we've reduced the size of the main compound on Hoo Green Lane, and as you can see on the plans, we've moved the electrical infrastructure away from residential properties at Hoo Green. At Peacock Lane, they'll no longer cross over the Manchester Spur on the high embankment that we showed in 2018. We'll now pass underneath the spur. You can also see a plan on the right where we've relocated the electrical infrastructure that we spoke about earlier from the Hoo Green area. There are also further changes in your area as part of our ongoing design work. Summary of these are at Hoo Green Lane. This will now run alongside the western side of the proposed railway to connect with the A50 rather than crossing the railway on an overbridge. And as we've referred to with the feeder station, the auto transformer feeder station, which we call an ATFS, and the grid supply point, the GSP, have moved from their location at Hoo Green Lane in the working draft environmental statement consultation to the area of the Manchester Spur near Hulsey and Peacock Lane. Other new information in our plans includes where we will need to do work on local utilities such as gas, water and electricity to protect supply during HS2 construction. And our newly published maps show the land required for us to do this work. You can see an example of how utility diversion works are shown on our plans on the screen at the moment. So this one is showing where we need to carry out utilities work at Hoo Green. The pink area shows the maximum construction space we would need to provide the diverted utility, and in the middle of that you can actually see the utility shown as a dotted or dashed line. Our current plans also show the construction traffic routes which we will use to move material around in order to build embankments and cuttings. And we do understand that construction traffic is a major concern for people, and building the railway will require moving very large amounts of material. So haul roads are temporary routes within the construction boundary that we'll use to move material from one location to another and help us to keep our vehicles off existing road networks as much as is practically possible. And we've learnt a lot from our discussions with the local community and the concerns that were felt here about the use of the narrow local road system when the new A556 was being built. And we've worked hard to try to minimise these movements. In most places, the use of borrow pits is also expected to substantially reduce the number of vehicles on local roads that would otherwise be required to transport materials to and from existing quarries. Borrow pits are not needed in your community area, but there are 4 in neighbouring community area MAO2 to the south from Lostock Railham southwards. 3 of them are located alongside the A530 Nantwich Road, either side of the Shropshire Union Canal, and a 4th is located alongside the M6 near the village of Biley. So as an example, this slide shows a borrow pit shaded in grey, and this is one located between the railway and Coal Pit Lane at Stamford. So a word about ground investigations. As many of you may know, we recently started a round of advanced ground investigations, or GI work, around Cheshire to better understand the challenging ground conditions in this particular area. So GI is the examination and study of the soil, the rocks, and the groundwater below the surface. And this information helps us to understand the ground conditions along the route to ensure the new railway is constructed safely and efficiently. So further GI work will be carried out across the whole route later in our programme. The GI work will include non-intrusive investigation using geotechnics to help build up a digital picture of what's going on underground, and some intrusive investigations such as drilling and taking samples for testing. Finally, the plans shared with you today will be part of our submission for the Phase 2B hybrid bill to Parliament, which is expected in early 2022 or sooner if possible. And this is how the government gains permission to build this nationally important infrastructure. And so with the submission in 2022, 2024 is when we expect royal assent to be granted to go ahead with the scheme. Early enabling works such as utility diversions and compound setups may start soon after, but the main civil works will commence, we think, in 2026. And finally, Phase 2B will be operational between 2035 and 2040, although this will be subject to further work on the study of design and delivery options and outcomes from the Integrated Rail Programme and National Infrastructure Commission. So with that, Helen, I think over to you for questions.
Thank you, John. We will move on to some questions now. Firstly, I'd like to introduce our panel. Today we have joining us from HS2 Limited, Anna from Environment, Gillian from Engineering, Richard from Traffic and Transport, Ewan from Utilities. From the Department for Transport, we have Cameron from the Policy Team, Tom from the Northern Powerhouse Rail Team, and Dan joining us from Transport for the North. As Jonathan mentioned earlier, we'll answer as many general questions as possible given the time that we have. Our first question then is for Gillian. Would existing mainline services be able to make use of the HS2 track as thoroughfare for the West Coast mainline services, including Crewe Underpass?
Hi, thanks for the question. So I'm assuming that this is in relation to one of the items that we're currently consulting on, which is the addition of Crewe North Connection. And Crewe North Connection allows HS2 and NPR services, which are passing through Crewe, to get off of the West Coast Main Line and onto the HS2 Manchester leg and carry on their journey north, whether it be to Liverpool, to Manchester, or up onto the West Coast Main Line again near Goulburn. So that does enable that connection from the West Coast Main Line into the HS2 core infrastructure.
Thank you, Gillian. I'm going to bring another one straight to you. Will there be passive provision for even faster services along spur lines towards Liverpool and to Manchester?
Yeah, so at the last design refinement consultation that we had held in 2019, we consulted on the introduction of passive provision for future spur lines out to Liverpool from London and also Manchester to Liverpool. So these will allow faster services than the existing services. In terms of the speeds that we have provided in our passive provision, the speeds for these turnouts are at 160 kph. So they're not at the full high speed that we would be providing for the HS2 services. They are a reduced speed compared to that, but they will be faster than existing services. And then any further development of the routes out to Liverpool in terms of speeds of what will be running towards Liverpool, that is still within Transport for the North and their planning as Northern Powerhouse Rail progresses.
Thank you, Gillian. A question now for John. Is the change for the connection Liverpool to Manchester at Hulseath A56 M56 road junction area now approved?
John, you're on mute.
There's always one, isn't there? Sorry, I was on mute, everyone. Yeah, if I understand that correctly, this is referring to the is this the spur to Liverpool that's provided in the Hulseath area that we spoke about in the presentation? If that's the case, then yes, that very much is approved. That was part of the design refinement consultation back in 2019. It was one of the two junctions that were looked at, as well as some other infrastructure. And so in the launch that we've done in October, when the Minister of State launched this latest set of plans, he took the opportunity to confirm that provision for the Liverpool spur had been confirmed by himself, and that would be included within the phase 2B design. I hope that's the answer to the right question. Thank you.
Thank you, John. We haven't had a huge number of questions in, so I'm going to give it a couple of minutes whilst we wait to see if there are any more questions, and I will come back shortly. Question, and Gillian, sorry, a follow-up question to the first question that we asked. So in response to my first question, I'm referring to the fast express services that would only call at major stations on the West Coast Main Line. Would you be able to follow up on that one?
Okay, so in terms of the fast express services which are currently operated, I assume you're referring to, say, what used to be Virgin and is now the new service provider. So I guess the the business case for HS2, and one of the reasons for HS2, is to try and remove as many of those express services following up at those major stations off the existing line and onto the high-speed network. So the introduction of Crewe North Connection allows us to get even more connectivity of those services, which would be coming along the West Coast Main Line up to Crewe, and then it would facilitate those services jumping onto the HS2 line, which would then be able to come off, I guess, with future Northern Powerhouse rail infrastructure around the Halls Heath area, where we have the two new passive provisions for spurs out to Liverpool. But that would be dependent on Northern Powerhouse extending the rest of that provision. But those services could also carry on up through to the Goulburn Link, which then provides connectivity further to the north through Warrington, Wigan, and up to Scotland. Sorry, just to correct myself, Avanti was what I was meaning for the new provider of those West Coast services.
Thank you, Gillian. Question now to Anna. Are sound attenuation measures detailed on the published plans, and how will communities lobby for such measures to be provided locally, please?
Hi, thank you for your question. So in the maps, in the CT06 maps, that is the proposed scheme, it will be possible to see the noise barrier that HS2 has provided to reduce impacts on noise levels in the community area. There are also a document that the name is the Code of Construction Practice that set up a series of measures to reduce any sound, noise and vibrations impact during the construction activities. And also for the community area MO3, the ES, the environmental statement, set up a series of local measures to reduce the noise and sounds impacts on the community. Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Anna. A question now for John. We're soon moving to Pickmere Lane. The current plan shows a distance of 500 plus metres to our property. I would like to know the railway line would not change from now on. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Helen, and thanks for the call. Where we are now, this is the design that we intend to take with us to Parliament, and the line itself is not likely to change or come nearer to your property or further away from it. Certainly in the Pickmere Lane area, I think as I say, we said in the presentation, by 2022 we will be submitting our proposals in full to Parliament. So that would be the case for HS2 going to Parliament. Parliament has in previous votes endorsed the principle of HS2, and it would be unlikely that there would be any prospect of a shift in the alignment of the route. So the distance that the property you're looking at will probably be unchanged, I think. That's probably all I have to say on that, I think.
Thank you, John. A question now for Tom. Would the MPR track use the same track as HS2 track at Manchester Piccadilly in order to allow a thoroughfare of services between Liverpool and Manchester via the airport?
Hello, thank you for that question. So the MPR scheme is obviously at a much earlier stage in development than High Speed 2, but the design of the touch points is predicated on assuming that the MPR trains would be using the High Speed 2 infrastructure through Manchester Airport Station and into Manchester that way. Yes.
Thank you. A question now for Dan. We've had a couple of sort of similar questions on this. So has the NPR route been agreed?
Thanks, Helen. The government's IAP, Government's IAP Integrated Rail Plan, intended for publication at the end of this year is to set out future plans for HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail. We are currently developing a strategic outline case for the programme, which is to be submitted in March 2021. And that's the next step in developing a business case. So at the moment, the short answer is no. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that one. Question now for Gillian. Has the height of the line changed since the 2018 design of the Arley Brook Viaduct?
Yeah, so the alignment of the route has gone through some design development since we came out in 2018 with the working draft environmental statement. And as part of that design development, the specific asset you're talking about, the Arley Brook Viaduct, that has somewhat changed, partly due to the realignment of Pickmere Lane, and now Pickmere Lane going underneath the viaduct. The viaduct has extended a bit in length, and it has also raised at its highest point by about 1.5 metres compared to that last working draft environmental statement design update. So that's 1.5 metres.
Thanks, Gillian. A question for Ewan. The grid supply point relocation has resulted in relocation of overhead electricity supply lines. Do we have a confirmed plan of where the new lines will run?
Hi there, thanks for the question. So yes, National Grid have undertaken some design studies. Their existing lines need to be diverted to cater for the HS2 line, but also the new diverted route for the transmission line will tie into the grid supply point, which is where we extract power from the grid to facilitate traction power for the trains. So yeah, the new proposed diversion route is shown on our plans at the moment. If that answers the question.
Thank you, Ewan. A question now for Cameron. It's a follow-up one to one that was asked a little earlier. Can I just be clear, will Avanti still operate on the West Coast Main Line so that people have the option of cheaper rail fares that HS2 will surely charge, i.e. slower journey at lower cost with Avanti?
So Avanti is currently the shadow operator for HS2. That's going to be still to be confirmed whether it will be the same operator for HS2 and for the West Coast Main Line. But whatever the franchise agreement, we're clear that the prices for tickets on HS2 will be the same as those on the West Coast Main Line. So HS2 will not cost more under current agreements than the West Coast Main Line.
Thank you, Cameron. John, there was an earlier question around the MPR touch points and which ones have been approved. Would you just be able to expand on that? Someone's come back to say that they were referring to the more northern one. I think a general update just to reconfirm around the junctions and the consultation would be helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I can see the question. I'm sorry if I didn't fully understand it before. I think as I think the answer is no, if I've understood it, that all we've approved, as I say, is the ones that were in the 2019 DRC, and I get the impression this is about the prospective line of the MPR junction, sorry, the MPR link, as it were, to Liverpool, as it moves through and across the A56, and that would be not something that's been approved. It would be something that's part of the MPR programme. But as I say, I hope I've understood that right. But perhaps if others can comment. But I would say no. The only thing that, in terms of the MPR provision within HS2 that have been approved is our own passive provision that we've shown at Hulseath, and the other one at Highley as you come away from the airport. Nothing else has been set in stone by the minister.
Hi there. A question then for Tom, please. Again, around the MPR sort of questions. Essentially, both when will the MPR route from Liverpool to Manchester be finalised? And also, is there now a possibility for further changes through Agden, I assume on the HS2 route rather than MPR?
Hi, thank you. So I can take the timing point, but not the Agden point. I'm afraid I'll defer to colleagues on that. As we've sort of touched on a little bit so far, the MPR scheme's at a much earlier stage of development. So there's quite a few steps to go through on the way to sort of developing that further. And the first of those is, as we've said, the National Infrastructure Commission is going to be producing its rail needs assessment, and then the government will be producing its integrated rail plan. Subject to those, the government will then sort of take decisions about how it wants to proceed with Northern Powerhouse Rail and whether to proceed and sort of in what form. It would then go through the usual process of design refinements, consultation, planning and seeking consent. So there's no sort of precise dates for that yet, but I think what that sort of hopefully does indicate to you is that there's still quite some way to go in that stage in designing that bit of the project.
Thank you very much for that, Tom. A question now for Richard. During construction, Thorold Lane, Moss Lane, Millington Lane will all be closed, leaving only Boothmount Lane open in the area. Can we confirm that this will remain open at all times and there will be no construction traffic?
Hello, yes, thanks for the question. In that area, in Millington Lane area, there are principally a number of major mitigation measures that are embedded within the scheme, and these include direct accesses onto the A556. That will take traffic off the local roads between the M6 junction 19 going northwards up to as far as M56 junction 7. As I said, to relieve traffic from local roads and put it directly onto the A556 as quickly as possible. Okay.
Okay, I think we've answered most of the questions that are there at the moment. I'll do a further review, and if anybody has any further questions, please do add them to the Q&A. I have a question here for Tom. Is there any indication as to when MPR will be approved?
So I think as I've sort of touched on earlier, there's no direct indication that I can give you as yet. I've sort of set out some of the sort of stages that would have to happen before that, in terms of the NIC report, the integrated rail plan, and then the sort of process of designing, refining, consulting and consenting on route development. So I'm afraid I can't give you a direct answer. There is no indication as to when it would be approved. But what I can give you is a sort of sense that there's quite a lot of stages on the route that in getting through those will take some time.
Thanks for that one, Tom. A question then for Gillian. There's also construction work required in the area. How will you make sure you do not overload our local roads with construction traffic?
Yeah, so I guess since we came out with the working draft environmental statement, when we provided our first indication of what our construction traffic routes might be, we've done quite a significant amount of work to refine those routes. And as part of that work, what we have done is we've introduced 4 direct connections onto the strategic road network. So onto the A556 in this area, and those direct connections, one of them is close to the M6 viaduct and allows us to access the A556 at the southern end of the A556 and get straight onto the strategic road network. We also have another one which provides direct connection from vehicles on Chapel Lane to get onto the A556. Which significantly reduces traffic on local roads such as the A50. There's another direct connection that we have introduced close to the A556 near the M56, which provides direct access into that part of the Manchester Spur, and a further connection has also been provided near Yarwood Heath Lane and Tom Lane, just into the next community area of MA06. But all 4 of those direct connections that we have introduced as part of this latest design significantly reduce the amount of construction vehicles which will be using local roads and allows them to get onto the larger roads, the strategic road network, as quick as possible.
Thank you, Gillian. We've had a specific question, a follow-up to an earlier question. Richard, about the construction traffic on Boothbank Lane, will there be any construction traffic on there?
Yeah, there will be some construction at the very start of the project when we set up compounds, but as Gillian has explained, the mitigation measures, the embedded mitigation measures, will be taking traffic off directly onto the strategic road network as quickly as possible. So the idea is that any long-term construction traffic will be taken off the local roads as early as possible.
Thank you, Richard. A question now for Cameron. What track refinement is influenced by Parliament and the National Infrastructure Commission and ongoing rail reviews?
Okay, so I think this refers to the integrated rail plan, which, as was mentioned, is due to be published by the end of the year. So the IRP is looking at how we can integrate HS2 Phase 2B, MPR and Midlands Engine Rail together to create more benefits for the people who live in those areas. As for exactly what track refinements it covers, we don't know until that independent review is published. Like I said, that will be at the end of the year, and then we'll take the conclusions from that forward, as well as all the responses from this consultation to work out how to best make those changes.
Thank you. A question now for John around safeguarding. The safeguarding is largely determined by the distance from the centre of the HS2 line. The disruption caused by building HS2 will be significant and over 9 years. Should this not be taken into account when deciding what's in safeguarding and what is in need to sell?
Okay, thank you, Helen, and thank you to the questioner. I think that a couple of things that just to clarify here is safeguarding is something we do in HS2 to protect our proposed construction area from other development, as it were. It's kind of a planning hold on anything going on in within our pink construction boundary, so that we can protect that. So that's not per se connected to the centre line of the railway. And clearly that's where the bulk of the safeguarding will happen, but we'll safeguard anywhere where we need to do the work. So when we showed the utilities plans in the presentation with all the pink around it, they can be often quite a distance from the centre line, but they need to be safeguarded because we will need at some stage, or our utility partners will need to go in and perform some work there. So that's a measure we take for our own construction needs, as it were. It's not a compensation scheme in that sense, and I think people what is often linked to safeguarding is the ability or the definition of blight, where someone who has a residential property which is shown in safeguarding can say, well, I can't sell this now, and there's a legal provision that would allow them to submit a blight notice and require HS2 to buy that property, and that's kind of a legal process that we comply with as well as everyone else. It's not compensation as such, but it's a provision to protect you if you find that you've been actually directly blighted by the scheme in a legal sense. Now, need to sell is something different. Need to sell is a scheme that HS2 runs, and it has no specific geographical boundary. You could be right on the right up against the lip of the scheme, or you could be some distance away. But what Need to Sell does is allow people to ask HS2 to purchase property if they have a compelling need of their own to move, and they can't do that because all this provisional work from HS2 is stopping their ability to sell at a fair price on the market. So one is a scheme that we've introduced whereby we will help people who are kind of stuck within the HS2 construction area, as it were, or outside it. Whereas safeguarding something specific, it's a legal measure that we take to make sure that we have control over development within our construction boundary, as it were. But so two separate things really. And need to sell isn't, you don't have to be within that pink boundary to apply for Need to Sell. If you can't sell your property and you can establish that the reason why you can't get a fair price for it is because of HS2, simply that, then you can put an application in and it's considered along with some other criteria about ownership and proof of inability to sell. But you can put in that application, it goes to an independent panel and is reviewed on its merits, and the panel can determine that HS2 would have to buy that property from you at market value. And that's something we've been doing all along the line of the scheme now for many years.
Thank you, John. We're at our final question now. The final one is for Richard. Will the construction traffic be allowed on the small back lanes in the area?
Thanks for the question. The construction routes, the designated construction routes have been identified, and the HS2 construction traffic, HGV construction traffic is obliged to use those routes and only those routes. And we have made sure wherever possible that we've avoided use of back lanes, but inevitably there are some points where we have to go from a construction compound as quickly to the strategic road network, and mitigation has been identified where appropriate, where we are impacting on those smaller roads. Thank you. Just to add, they are on the CTO5 plans as the green dashed lines, which have been published.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, all our plans are available on our website, for the HS2 website. Thank you for all your other questions. I'll hand back over to Jonathan now.
Can I thank all participants for their questions, and also thank all panel members for their detailed responses. And I hope that you found today's webinar useful. All the information mentioned today can be found on the HS2 website, which is www.hs2.org.uk/phase 2B. If you have any questions or need help accessing the information, then please do contact our help desk on 08081 434 434 or by Minicom on 08088 56 472 or by emailing hs2inquiries@hs2.org.uk. Thank you again for joining this webinar, and I hope you can enjoy the rest of your day.